Your dad is mid-sentence when you realize he's not talking about the lawnmower anymore. And the second account is held in a trust domiciled in South Dakota, which is where the dynasty provision matters, he says, and you are standing in his garage in Columbus with a warm Sprite in your hand and grease on the sleeve of a shirt you bought at Target last Tuesday, and the fluorescent light above you is flickering the way it has flickered since you were 9 years old, and nothing about this room has changed, except that your father just said the word dynasty, like it was a socket wrench size. You are 27. You are a UX designer. You make $68,000 a year before taxes, which comes out to roughly $49,000 after federal, state, and the health insurance premium. Your company splits with you 60-40. You drive a 2012 Corolla with a dent in the rear quarter panel that you keep meaning to fix. Last month you canceled a streaming service and felt a small, unreasonable swell of pride about saving $14. You have a 401k with $11,000 in it. You thought that was fine. You thought you were doing okay. Your father is wearing the same New Balance sneakers he's worn in some variation since 2011, and he is telling you, in the same voice he used to explain how to check tire pressure, that his net worth is somewhere north of $1.2 billion. The Sprite can is sweating in your hand. You set it down on the workbench next to a Folgers tin full of screws. Your dad keeps talking. He has a manila folder open and he's pointing to a line on a printed spreadsheet. Not a laptop, not a tablet, a printed spreadsheet, because your father has never once in his life trusted a screen he couldn't fold. And the line he's pointing to says something about a securities-backed line of credit with a draw capacity you cannot process because the number has too many commas. He explains this casually. A securities-backed line of credit, he says, lets you borrow against a portfolio without selling anything. No sale, no capital gains event. The interest rate he's paying is lower than what you pay on your Corolla loan. He has been living off borrowed money for 20 years and has never once triggered a taxable event of meaningful size, because the portfolio beneath the borrowing has averaged north of 10% annually, and the borrowing rate has rarely topped 3.5%. He says this the way someone explains how a carburetor works. You realize you've stopped blinking, you don't ask the right question first. The first thing you say is, "Why do you still live here?" And here is a 1,200 square foot ranch house in Whitehall with vinyl siding and a yard your father mows himself with a Craftsman he bought at Sears before Sears died. The carpet in the living room is the same carpet from your childhood. There's a lazy boy with a permanent divot from where he watches Ohio State games. You used to be embarrassed to bring people here. You had a girlfriend in college, Mina, and you drove her past the house once but didn't stop. Told her your dad was out of town. The truth was you didn't want her to see the house, the truck, the clip-on sunglasses, the way your father clipped coupons for Kroger like the coupons were load-bearing walls. He looks at you now and says, "I like this house," and moves on to the next page. The next page is about your sister. Nora is 31. Nora, it turns out, has known for 3 years. Your father told her first, not because he loved her more, but because she asked. You remember the Thanksgiving when Nora casually mentioned tax loss harvesting at dinner, and you laughed because you thought she'd been watching too much YouTube and she just looked at her plate and said nothing. That silence cost you 3 years. Nora has been working with your father's estate attorney. Nora has a GRAT, a grantor retained annuity trust, already funded. The way it works, your father explains, is that he transferred assets into the trust, receives annuity payments back over a set term, And whatever growth exceeds the IRS hurdle rate, which was hovering around 5.5% when the trust was created, passes to Nora free of gift and estate tax. The growth above the line is the gift. The gift was invisible. Nora has been a beneficiary of invisible money for 3 years, and you have been calculating whether you could afford the appetizer at the restaurant where you took your mother for her birthday. Your mother. That's the open door you walk through next. She died when you were 19. Ovarian cancer, 8 months from diagnosis to funeral. And you remember that the funeral was small, that the flowers were modest, that your father paid for everything in cash at the funeral home, and you assumed it was because he'd saved up carefully. You assumed a lot of things. You assumed your father's auto repair shop on Broad Street was what it appeared to be, a 3-bay garage with a hand-painted sign, 4 lifts, and a waiting area with coffee that tasted like it had been made during the Clinton administration. You didn't know he owned the building. You didn't know he owned the strip mall the building sat inside. You didn't know he'd bought the rest of the block in 2009 when commercial real estate cratered, and nobody was buying anything, and your father, who never went to college, was apparently deploying capital at a pace that would have impressed a mid-market private equity fund. 43 properties, held through a family-limited partnership, which allowed him to transfer limited partnership interests to you and Nora at a valuation discount, because minority interests in a private entity are worth less on paper than their proportional share of the whole, and the IRS allows that discount, typically in the range of 20% to 35%, which means your father has been moving wealth out of his taxable estate at a fraction of its actual value for over a decade. He tells you this while eating a banana. You are losing your mind. He is eating a banana, and the thing that breaks you isn't the money. It's the truck. The 2009 F-150, gray with a toolbox bolted to the bed, and a pine air freshener that's been hanging from the rearview mirror so long, it's just a green shape. Every year at Christmas, your sister floated the idea of getting him a new truck, and he said no, and you thought it was because he couldn't afford it. And there was a year, you were 23, maybe 24, when you offered to split the cost with Nora, $2,000 each, toward a down payment. And your father said no again, and you felt a feeling you can only now name correctly. You were ashamed of him. You were ashamed of a man who was worth more than the CEO of the company you work for, and you were ashamed because he wore New Balance and drove a truck with 200,000 miles and lived in a house with vinyl siding. And the shame wasn't about him. The shame was about you. It was about what you needed other people to see when they looked at your family. Your father knew. He has always known. He watched you not stop the car the day you drove Mina past the house. He was standing at the kitchen window. He never mentioned it. That is the part you will not be able to metabolize for a very long time. He moves to the next page. The next page is about dying. Your father is 64. He is healthy. But he is talking about dying because this is what people with dynasty trusts do. They architect the transfer before the transfer is needed. When he dies, you and Nora will receive assets with a stepped-up basis, meaning the cost basis resets to fair market value at the date of death. If he bought a property for $200,000 in 2004 and it's worth $1.8 million when he dies, you inherit it at $1.8 million. You could sell it the next day and the capital gain is zero. The IRS calls this the stepped-up basis. Your father calls it the reason he never sold anything. Every dollar of appreciation that occurred during his lifetime evaporates from the tax ledger at the moment of his death. This is not a loophole. This is the law. It's how the wealthiest families in the country have preserved generational wealth for decades. Buy, borrow, die. He doesn't use that phrase. He says, I bought things, I borrowed against them, and someday you'll get them clean. Clean means tax-free. Clean means $1 billion estate that will pass to you and your sister inside a structure so layered, trusts, partnerships, LLCs, each nested inside the next, that the effective estate tax could be close to zero, even though the federal exemption is $15 million per person, and his estate dwarfs it. He has been working with attorneys and CPAs for 20 years to build this architecture. You have been refreshing your checking account on Thursdays, hoping your direct deposit hit early. You sit down on an overturned 5-gallon bucket. Your father sits on the stool he's sat on for 30 years. The garage smells like motor oil and cold concrete and the Sprite you've now forgotten about. You want to be angry. You try. You start building the case in your head, the years you ate ramen. Not because you were in college, but because you were 25 and broke. The student loans you took out because you thought there was no other option. The anxiety that lived in your chest, like a second heartbeat every time rent was due. You were never in danger. There was a net beneath you the entire time, and you didn't know it was there. And you can't decide if that makes your father cruel or generous in a way you don't yet have the vocabulary to describe. He could have told you. He could have bought you a house. He could have paid off your loans with what amounts to rounding error on his balance sheet. He didn't. He wanted you to build something with your hands first. That's what he says. You want to hate that answer. You can't. Not completely. Nora calls that night. She doesn't gloat. She says, "You okay?" And you say yes, and she knows you're lying, and you know she knows. And this is the most honest conversation you've had with your sister in years. She tells you that she struggled with it too, that she spent a week furious, that she drove to Dad's house at 2 a.m. once and sat in the driveway and didn't go in. You ask her what changed, and she says, I stopped thinking about what he didn't give me and started thinking about what he was trying not to take from me. And you hang up the phone and sit on your apartment floor in the dark with your back against the wall and the radiator clicking, and you don't know what to feel, so you feel everything at once, and it all cancels out into a kind of silence that is louder than any number your father showed you today. There's a document you haven't signed yet. The irrevocable trust. Once you sign, the assets placed inside cannot be pulled back. Your father cannot change his mind. You cannot change yours. For 2 weeks, the document sits on your kitchen counter next to a water bill and a takeout menu from the Thai place on 5th. You think about not signing it. You think about calling your father and saying, give it away. All of it, every property and every share and every trust. Give it to someone who doesn't feel like the ground just shifted 6 inches to the left. You almost make that call. You get as far as pulling up his number. Then you think about a daughter you don't have yet. A girl who might someday stand in a garage and hear something she doesn't expect from someone she thought she knew. And you wonder what you'd want to have built for her by then, and whether the building requires material you didn't manufacture yourself. 11 years from now, a girl who has your mother's eyes and your father's stubborn quiet will be standing at the edge of a driveway, watching you through the screen door of a house that isn't large, that has a yard you mow yourself, and you'll be in the garage bent over something mechanical, your hands dark with grease, and she'll think you are just her parent, ordinary and irritating and always there, and she will have no idea what's underneath, and she'll turn back inside to finish her cereal, and the screen door will close behind her with a sound like a question she won't think to ask for years.